Hey guys, Lawrence here. Welcome back to the AIRTOC demo series. Today we're focusing in on one of the most visible and important deliverables in execution and monitoring and controlling, the project closure report. Let's go. In this lesson, I'm going to walk you through what a closure report is, why it matters, and how it keeps stakeholders aligned throughout the project. Then, just like in the previous demos, I'll transition into a live AIRTOC walkthrough and show you how to generate a professional closure report using the Aimpm Project Management Coach. As always, we like to start with the PMI definition, and PMI defines the project closure report as a formal document created to summarize the overall performance and outcomes of a project. The report is collaboratively developed by the project manager and the technical leads, providing key details such as how the project goals were achieved, lessons learned, and overall results. And again, this is a good definition, but I don't think it really gets to the crux of what a good project closure report is, so let's dive in deeper. Here, we define the project closure report as a summary of what was actually delivered on your project, a full confirmation of the scope completion, a comparison of the plan versus the actual performance, a review of all of your risks, issues, and lessons learned, a record of your stakeholder acceptance, and a formal closure of your contracts, your documents, and all of your resources that are assigned to your project. It's the final deliverable that transitions the project from active execution into organizational closeout. And there's a few pieces that go along with this, so let's take a look. First, we need to talk about why your closure report is so important. A strong closure report improves transparency, it documents all of the variances on the project, it captures all of your lessons learned, it identifies any remaining risks that need to be turned over to operations, it confirms your stakeholder acceptance, and it formally closes out the project. These pieces are essential in order for you to actually walk away from your efforts. Without them, your closure report is going to be very hard to draft, and ultimately you may not be able to walk away until you get some of these pieces in order. So now let's talk about some of the elements of the closure report and how things need to feed into it in order for you to actually get that final approval to close your project. The first piece is to document the scope completion and validate all of your deliverables are done. And we do this throughout the life cycle of the project. So as deliverables are done, we're validating these things, but you want to make sure that you have a full account of everything that you've done going into your project closure report. The next thing is to close out or transition any risks that may still be viable on your project to an operational team. Now, this takes a little bit more in-depth work because you want to make sure that operations is ready and available to take on any risks or extra work that may come about if that risk turns into an issue. If you're able to do that, then you can move on to finalizing your financials. And this is where you start to close out the business and you release your team. Once you release team members, that gives leadership a lot more confidence to say we can start to close things out financially on this project because we're no longer paying for resources that need to be allocated to this effort. And once you reach that spot, you can let go of your team and start to archive all of your documents. So in order for you to get to a good closure report, these are the elements that need to be put in place first so that when that closure report hits the leadership's desk, they can approve it and you can close your project. Now that we've covered what the project closure report is and why it matters, let's move over to the AIRTOC framework and the Aimpm Project Management Coach so that we can build one ourselves. Let's go. Okay, team, before we get started on the project closure report demonstration, a few things that we want to make sure you're aware of. Number one, for the sake of time and simplicity, we're going to be using simulated minimal data. In real projects, you'll likely have far more context to add to your prompt. Number two, even with simplified data, you'll still see how powerful AIRTOC prompts can be, but remember, the more context you add, the better the output. And number three, this process applies to every AIRTOC template in the textbook. The workflow is universal and repeatable across all deliverables. Let's dive in. So as always, before every demonstration, we like to walk you guys through all of the components of the demonstration. So the first thing you're going to see here is the AIRTOC template, the project closure report. Same template that you'll be able to find in your AIRTOC library as well as your textbooks. Below that, we have our scenario. Okay, so the real world scenario that is going to feed information into our actual prompt. Now, once we have all of the prompt information filled in, we'll go into our Aimpm Project Management Coach, place the prompt and see what happens. Let's dive in. Okay, so circling back to the AIRTOC template for the project closure report, again, you'll find this in your AIRTOC library as well as your textbook. It has the entire framework here, so let's just cover it very quickly. You have your AI platform, your role, task, and output, as well as your context with the two parts there. And AI produces, again, is just an example of what you should expect AI to produce after you submit your prompt. Circling back to the top for the AI platform, again, we're going to use either Gemini or ChatGPT for this prompt. The role is a project manager or a PMO manager. Our task is to draft a project closure report summarizing outcomes, compliance, and governance approvals. The output is governance-ready closure report confirming project completion. Our inputs for context, again, very high-level information that probably comes from your charter or other source documents. That includes your scope, your baseline problem and goal, your constraints, risks, and stakeholders. For the data portion, we have scope data, schedule data, cost data, risk and issue data, and lessons data. And of course, we always like to give suggestions in terms of the type of data that you may want to include in order for you to get out a good project closure report. So these are things like your plan versus actual finish dates, your final budget versus the spend analysis. All of these pieces of information will be vitally important in terms of that closure report. All right, let's move on to our scenario now so that we understand what the situation is. As the workflow automation program reached its final milestone, the PM needed to verify all 27 deliverables were formally accepted by the department leads and the PMO. The actual finish date slipped by 6 days, requiring documented explanation and governance acknowledgment. Finance requested a final cost variance summary as total spend exceeded the baseline by 9%, triggering a mandatory PMO review. Internal audit required confirmation that all compliance documentation, traceability evidence, and closure artifacts were complete before sign-off. With several residual risks and issues transitioning to operations, governance directed the PM to produce a project closure report to confirm completion, compliance status, and final approval readiness. So this is our charge. Let's scroll down to our template now with the simulated data to see what we have. We have the AI platform, we have the role, task, and output, and now we have some additional context along with the data. So we have our high-level context input for context, which is scope, the baseline problem and goal, our constraints, our risks, and our stakeholders. All of this stuff is filled in based on the context above. And also we have some data inputs, which is scope data, all 27 deliverables, the schedule data, the cost data, risk and issue data, and lessons data. So based on this information, again, you may want to add in some actual documentation to support this. This is just a quick high-level write-up of the information that's needed for the AI to make the calculations. Okay, so we're going to copy this and we're going to paste this into our Aimpm project management coach. And we're just going to hit enter and see what happens. Not adding any additional queries, the Aimpm project management coach understands what you're feeding it when you give it an AIRTOC query. So let's see what we get. A project closure report for the workflow automation program prepared for the CFO, CIO, PMO, governance board, and internal audit. It's prepared by the project manager. Of course, you can put your name here and insert your date. So what do we have here for the closure report? We have an executive summary, final project outcomes. We have schedule performance. We have cost performance. We have a final risk and issue disposition. We have compliance, governance, and documentation status, and it's still going here. We have a lessons learned summary. We have benefits realization snapshot. Number 9 is operational transition readiness, and number 10 is final sign-off recommendations and approval signatures here. AI is going to give us some next steps. So if we want, we can generate a PMO formatted PDF for this report. If we don't need to change anything, if the report's final and we've reviewed it and everything looks good, PDF works. A version inserted into your official PMO closure template, a board-ready executive summary, lessons learned deep dive, benefits realization plan. Okay, so these are our options here. And I think I may actually ask for this one. Just to iterate through this a little bit further, let me ask AI to produce an executive summary based on this report. Okay. Now, this is just a matter of iterations, right? I can take the first output, copy and paste it in to a report. And then if I need to make a more high-level executive report, this is something that I can do. All right. So now it's breaking it out into a very high-level executive summary. Same detail, but just a lot more high level for an executive to review. If they want to dive in deeper, they can go into the actual report. Based on these 11 sections here in the information that we have, it would take you a lot longer to actually create this final closure report. What AI is able to do is take a very minimal set of information with the context and blow it up into something like a full closure report that's maybe 80 to 90% complete, that you have to iterate through maybe once or twice before you get your final output. The biggest thing here is to understand that there are systems in place that can make you much more efficient in your day. No matter which deliverable you're producing, AI has a way to help you do it a little bit faster. And if you use structured prompting, like we're showing you here with these AIRTOC templates, your outputs are much more beneficial, much more easy to iterate through, and pretty much you're getting the 80 to 90% document that's ready to go. Okay? Getting ready to move on to the next video. We will see you guys there.